Yeah, I never thought I'd find myself here sharing a story like this, but life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it, and now I'm left wondering if the life I thought I had was ever even real. Let me start from the beginning. My wife, Laura, and I have been together for over a decade. We met at a mutual friend's wedding, and it was one of those cliche love at first sight moments. She was smart, funny, and had this magnetic energy that could light up a room. I was hooked from the start. We dated for a couple of years before tying the knot, and honestly, I thought I hit the jackpot. For years, we were that couple everyone admired. Our friends used to call us relationship goals, and even I couldn't help but feel proud of what we'd built. Laura was everything I wanted in a partner. She was supportive, ambitious, and seemed to genuinely care about me. We had our fair share of challenges like any couple, but I always thought we tackled them as a team. We bought a house in a nice neighborhood, settled into our respective careers, and built a life that looked picture perfect from the outside. Laura worked as an event planner, and I managed a small but successful IT consulting firm. Life was busy, but good. We'd have date nights, weekend getaways, and even talked about starting a family someday. I was certain we were happy. I'd wake up every morning feeling lucky to have her by my side. Sure, the spark wasn't always as fiery as it had been in the beginning, but I thought that was just part of being in a long-term relationship. You settle into a comfortable rhythm, and I believed we had done just that. But looking back now, I realize I missed the signs. I was so caught up in the life we'd built together that I didn't notice the cracks forming beneath the surface. I didn't see the distance growing between us, the quiet shifts in her behavior that would eventually shatter the illusion of our perfect marriage. If you'd told me back then that I'd one day be sitting here questioning everything about the woman I loved, I would have laughed in your face. But here I am, sharing my story with strangers on the internet, because the life I thought I had wasn't the life I actually did. Looking back, the first signs were subtle. At the time, I didn't think much of them. I chalked it up to stress, long work hours, or just the natural ebb and flow of a marriage. But now every little moment feels like a puzzle piece I should have noticed sooner. It started with Laura spending more time on her phone. She used to leave it lying around the house, on the kitchen counter, the coffee table, wherever. But one day, I realized she'd started keeping it close. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Everyone's a little attached to their phone, right? But then she added a password, something she'd never done before. When I asked her about it, she just shrugged and said, work stuff. Confidential emails and whatnot. It seemed harmless, so I didn't push. Then there were the late nights. Laura started staying at work longer, saying she had to prepare for big events or deal with last-minute changes. Her job as an event planner was demanding, so it made sense. At least it did at first. But as the weeks went by, the late nights became more frequent, and she seemed distant, even when she was home. Conversations that used to flow naturally now felt strained. I'd ask her how her day went, and she'd give me a one-word answer before burying herself in her phone or zoning out. Date nights became less frequent, replaced with excuses about being too tired or needing to catch up on work. When we did go out, it felt like she was somewhere else entirely, her eyes flicking to her phone whenever she thought I wasn't looking. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase. Maybe she really was stressed, or maybe we were just in one of those lulls that every couple goes through. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was like there was this invisible wall between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break through it. The tipping point came one night when we were sitting on the couch watching TV and noticed her smiling at her phone, a soft, private smile that didn't feel like it belonged to me. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She looked up, startled, and quickly locked the screen. "Oh, just a coworker," she said, brushing it off. "Nothing important." Her answer felt too rehearsed, too quick, but I let it go, telling myself I was just being paranoid. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the woman I'd spent over a decade with couldn't possibly have anything to hide. But the truth was, Laura was changing, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt like I didn't really know her anymore. A few years ago, after a string of burglaries in our neighborhood, we installed hidden security cameras around the house. They were small, unobtrusive, and mostly there for peace of mind. I never thought much about them, and honestly, I rarely checked the footage. Laura knew about them when we first put them in, but over time, I figured she'd forgotten they even existed. One night, I came home late from work. Laura had already gone to bed, her phone charging on her nightstand. I was sitting in the living room, nursing a beer and trying to unwind, when a thought crossed my mind. Check the cameras. I don't know what prompted it. Maybe it was the nagging feeling in the back of my mind, or maybe it was something deeper, something I didn't want to admit to myself yet. Either way, I grabbed my laptop, pulled up the camera app, and started scrolling through the recordings. Most of it was boring. Me leaving for work, Laura doing laundry, the dog wandering around the yard. But then I saw something that made my stomach drop. It was a clip from earlier that afternoon. Laura was standing by the front door, smiling as she let a man into her house. He was tall, well-dressed, and definitely not someone I recognized. They didn't kiss or hug, nothing outright damning, but the way they looked at each other, the familiarity in their gestures, was enough to make my chest tighten. I kept watching, my hands shaking as I fast-forwarded through the footage. They went into the living room and sat on the couch. The camera didn't pick up any sound, but their body language said it all. She leaned in close to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He smiled, his hand brushing against hers. It was subtle, but it was enough. I closed the laptop, my heart pounding. I wanted to wake her up right then and there, to demand answers, but something stopped me. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed more. The next day, while Laura was at work, I checked the footage again. And again. I started keeping tabs on the recordings, watching her every move when I wasn't home. Over the next couple of weeks, the same man showed up several more times. Each visit, they seemed more comfortable, more intimate. The way they smiled at each other, the way she looked at him, it made my stomach churn. The cameras had been meant to keep us safe, to protect our home from intruders. But now, they were showing me something far worse. Laura wasn't just letting someone into our house. She was letting him into our life. Our marriage. I didn't know who he was yet, or how far things had gone, but one thing was clear. My gut feeling had been right. Something was very, very wrong. After seeing the man on the camera footage, everything in me wanted to confront Laura immediately, but I held back. If there was one thing I'd learned from watching her, it was that she was good at lying. Too good. I needed more evidence, something irrefutable. So I decided to play the long game. I started paying closer attention to her schedule. On the days I worked late, she was quick to mention she'd be catching up on errands or having a relaxing night at home. Those just so happened to be the days the man would show up. I knew this because I started checking the camera recordings daily, piecing together a timeline of their meetings. It was always the same routine. He'd arrive in the afternoon, usually carrying a small gift. Flowers once, a box of chocolates another time. Laura would greet him at the door, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. They'd spend hours in the house together, mostly in the living room, though one recording showed them heading upstairs. That one broke me. Watching them disappear together into the bedroom we'd shared for over a decade was like having my heart ripped out of my chest. I fast-forwarded through the footage, refusing to watch what I already knew was happening behind those closed doors. But I didn't stop there. I started keeping tabs on her social media. She wasn't stupid. There were no public posts or photos that could give her away, but there were hints. She liked posts from accounts I didn't recognize, and her captions on certain photos felt off. Too vague, too calculated. One night, while she was in the shower, I decided to check her phone. She'd been careful, always keeping it locked, but I knew the passcode, something she hadn't bothered to change. I scrolled through her messages, my hands shaking as I looked for his name. At first, I didn't find anything. Then I noticed a chat thread with no name, just a heart emoji as the title. My breath caught as I opened it. The messages were tame, almost cautious, but the undertones were unmistakable. He called her babe. She called him sweetheart. There were inside jokes, playful banter, and vague plans about meeting up. The most damning text came from him. Can't wait to see you again. Last time was incredible. You're amazing. Her reply? Missed you too, Thursday, same time. It was the same day I had a late work meeting. I closed her phone and put it back exactly as I'd found it, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. I didn't know who this guy was yet, but I knew enough. Laura was lying to me, betraying me, and she didn't even have the decency to try to hide it. I decided I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to know how far this went, how deep her betrayal ran. So I kept watching, kept listening, biding my time until I had everything I needed to confront her. And when that moment came, I'd make sure she felt every ounce of the pain she'd caused me. Over the next week, I kept gathering proof. Every time I checked the security cameras, every time I skimmed through her phone while she was asleep, I found more and more damning evidence. Each discovery felt like a fresh stab to the chest. I couldn't believe that the woman I had loved and trusted for over a decade was capable of this. Amy spoke. One day, while watching another recording, I saw them sitting together on our living room couch. It wasn't just the way they sat close or the way she smiled at him. It was the way their hands intertwined, fingers laced together like they belonged to each other. That image burned into my mind. I took a screenshot of the footage and saved it to my laptop. But the real breaking point came a few days later. I decided to check the camera in our bedroom, a place I'd never expected to need surveillance, but thank God I had installed one there for extra security. The footage made my stomach churn. Laura and the man entered the bedroom, laughing softly as they closed the door behind them. A few minutes later, they were on the bed, tangled together in a way that left no room for denial. I had to pause the video several times just to calm myself down. My heart raced with fury, disgust, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I couldn't watch it all. I didn't need to. I had all the proof I could possibly need. I saved the recording, my hands trembling as I did so. There was no way she could talk her way out of this. By this point, I was less concerned about why and more focused on how. How could she bring another man into our home, into our bed? The audacity, the sheer disrespect. It was almost unbearable. I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted to do it right, to expose her lies in a way that left no room for excuses or justifications. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand the depth of the damage she had caused. So I started planning. I wasn't going to do this in private, not after what she'd done. I decided to invite her parents over for dinner. They'd always admired our relationship, and they deserved to know the truth about their daughter's actions. This wasn't just about exposing her to me. It was about holding her accountable in front of the people she cared about. I spent hours organizing everything, making sure I had all the evidence ready to present. The screenshots, the videos, even the text messages, I had it all. I wanted her to know that I wasn't just guessing or making assumptions. I knew. When the night of the dinner arrived, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Part of me hated what I was about to do, but another part couldn't wait to watch her lies crumble in front of everyone. In the days leading up to the dinner, I felt like I was living with a stranger. Laura went about her usual routines, oblivious to the fact that I knew everything. She kissed me goodbye in the mornings, texted me reminders about groceries, and even cuddled up to me on the couch as if nothing was wrong. It made my skin crawl. Every moment felt like a cruel parody of the life we once had. I kept up the charade, playing the part of the clueless husband while she continued her double life. Every time I watched the security footage or checked her phone, I found more evidence of her betrayal. Their messages grew bolder, with her writing things like, "Can't wait to see you again. Miss you so much." And him replying with, "You're the best thing in my life." It was disgusting. But it also gave me clarity. She wasn't just having an affair. She was building an entirely separate life with this man. A life she'd hidden from me while pretending to be the devoted wife. I noticed her patterns too. She always made sure her lover visited during the hours I was at work or running errands. On days when I was home, she'd text him instead, her face lighting up with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. It was infuriating, but it also confirmed what I'd suspected. She wasn't going to stop. She didn't regret her actions because she didn't think I'd ever find out. But she was wrong. I knew everything, and I was just biding my time. The hardest part was acting normal. I continued to make dinner, take care of the house, and even plan a weekend trip that I knew we'd never take. Every moment spent pretending felt like another betrayal, this time of myself. But I had to see it through. I wanted her to understand the depth of what she'd done. to see the faces of her parents when they realized what kind of person she had become. By the time the day of the dinner arrived, I had everything prepared. The videos, the screenshots, the messages, I had it all organized and ready to go. I invited Laura's parents under the guise of a family dinner. They adored me, often telling me how lucky Laura was to have a husband like me. That thought made my stomach turn. If only they knew. Laura seemed excited about the dinner, chatting about what dishes to make and asking me to pick up a bottle of her parents' favorite wine. She had no idea what was coming. And honestly, I wasn't sure how she'd react. Would she cry? Would she deny it? Would she try to flip the script and make me the villain? Whatever her reaction, I was ready. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about exposing the lies she had built her double life upon. And by the end of the night, there would be no more pretending. The day of the dinner was a whirlwind of nerves and preparation. I double-checked everything. My evidence, the timing, and my resolve. I'd gone over the confrontation 100 times in my head, imagining every possible reaction from Laura. No matter what, I told myself, I had to stay calm and controlled. This wasn't about creating chaos, it was about revealing the truth. I made sure the living room was set up perfectly. My laptop, connected to the TV, was ready to play the footage. The screenshots and messages were saved in a folder, easily accessible. I even prepared a timeline of events in case she tried to wiggle out of it. There would be no room for excuses or lies. Laura was cheerful as she prepared dinner, humming to herself as if nothing was wrong. Watching her act so normal only fueled my determination. How could she be so carefree, so shameless, knowing what she'd been doing behind my back? Her parents arrived right on time, bringing their usual warmth and enthusiasm. They hugged me, thanked me for organizing the dinner, and complimented Laura on the meal, played along smiling and chatting, all while feeling like a storm was brewing inside me. When we all sat down at the table, the atmosphere was light and friendly. Laura's dad shared a story about his golf game, and her mom asked about our weekend plans. Laura chimed in, laughing and joking like she hadn't betrayed me in the worst possible way. It was surreal. After dinner, I cleared my throat and stood up. The idea has aged. Before we move to dessert, I have something important to share, I said, my voice steady. Laura looked at me curiously, her parents smiling in anticipation. I've been thinking a lot about our family and how much it means to me, I began. Honesty and trust are the foundation of any relationship, and I believe those values are what keep us strong. Everyone nodded, including Laura. She smiled warmly, completely unaware of what was coming. But sometimes honesty can be painful, I continued, my tone hardening, especially when it reveals truths you never wanted to believe. I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The screen lit up with the footage from our living room camera. The first clip showed Laura and her lover sitting on the couch, their hands intertwined. Gasps filled the room, and Laura's smile vanished. Her parents exchanged confused, horrified looks. "Mark, what is this?" Laura stammered, her face turning pale. "Keep watching," I said coldly. The next clip played, this time from our bedroom. Laura and the man entered, closing the door behind them. It wasn't graphic, I'd fast-forwarded past the worst parts, but it was clear enough to leave no doubt about what had happened. Her mother covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. Her father stood up, his face red with anger. Laura sat frozen, her hands trembling. "Do you want to explain this, Laura?" I asked, turning to her. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her face was a mixture of fear and shame, and for once she had nothing to say. Her parents stared at her, waiting for an explanation. "I trusted you," I said, my voice shaking. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By bringing another man into our home? Into our bed?" Her mother finally broke the silence. "Laura, is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What have you done?" Laura started crying, her sobs filling the room. I can explain," she stammered. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." I scoffed, crossing my arms. "A mistake? This wasn't a one-time thing, Laura. This was a full-blown affair. Don't insult me by calling it a mistake. Laura, I don't even know what to say. This is unthinkable." "Neither do I," replied, my voice cold. But I'm done being lied to. I wanted you both to know the truth because I refuse to keep pretending everything is fine. Laura's sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. This was her mess, and she was finally facing the consequences. The room was thick with tension. Laura's sobs filled the silence, but no one moved to comfort her. Her mother looked at her in shock, her hands trembling as she held her glass of wine. Her father, usually composed and cheerful, stood stiffly, his face twisted in anger. "Laura," her father said, his voice low and stern, "I cannot believe what I have just seen." "What were you thinking?" She wiped at her face, her tears smearing her makeup. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whimpered. "It was just, I was feeling so lonely, and Mark has been so busy with work." "Oh, don't you dare blame me for this," I snapped, cutting her off. "You don't get to use loneliness as an excuse to bring another man into our home, into our bed." Her mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Laura, how could you? How could you do this to Mark, to your family?" Laura looked around, her eyes darting between her parents and me, as if searching for an escape. "I made a mistake, okay? I know I messed up, but it didn't mean anything. It's over now." I laughed bitterly, pulling out my phone. "Over? Funny, because the messages I found on your phone don't seem to back that up." I opened the screenshots folder and handed the phone to her father. He scrolled through the messages, his face darkening with every word. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. Laura, this doesn't sound like it's over." Laura buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I don't know what to say," she mumbled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her father slammed the phone down on the table, making everyone jump. "Sorry? Sorry doesn't fix this, Laura. You've destroyed your marriage, your family. How do you expect Mark to forgive you after this?" Laura looked at me, desperation in her eyes. "Mark, please. I love you. I don't want to lose you. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice cold. "This isn't something you can make right. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And the worst part, you didn't even have the decency to admit it until I caught you." Her mother stood up, shaking her head in disbelief. "I need some air," she muttered, walking out of the room. Her father followed, muttering something about needing a moment to think. That left Laura and me alone, the weight of her actions pressing down on both of us. She looked at me, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling. "Mark, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, I can't lose you." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Laura, you already lost me the moment you let him into our home. There's no coming back from this." Her sobs grew louder, but I stood firm. For once, I wasn't the one who needed to fix things. This time, she was the one left to pick up the pieces. Laura's sobs echoed through the living room, her hands clutching the edge of the dining table as if it could somehow steady her. "Mark, please," she begged, her voice shaking. "I know I've hurt you, but I'll do anything to fix this. I swear, it's over with him. It was a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake." Her words felt hollow, like an echo bouncing off a canyon wall. "A mistake?" I said, my voice ice cold. "A mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove, Laura. This was a deliberate choice. Over and over again. You planned it, you lied about it, and you thought I'd never find out." She flinched at my tone, her tears falling harder. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, her face crumpling. "I wasn't thinking straight, I was lonely, and—" "Stop," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't you dare try to blame this on loneliness or on me. You could have talked to me, Laura. You could have told me how you felt, but instead, you brought another man into our house, into our bed. Do you even understand what you've done?" Her shoulders shook as she broke down completely, her words coming out in fragmented sobs. "I was stupid. I didn't think it would go this far. I never wanted to lose you, Mark. I love you." "Love?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You don't love me, Laura. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. You don't betray the people you love. You don't lie to their faces and destroy the life you built together." She reached out for me, her hand trembling. "Please," she whispered. "Give me one more chance. I'll cut him off completely. I'll go to therapy, whatever it takes. Just don't leave me." I stepped back, avoiding her touch. You already left me the moment you chose him, I said, my voice breaking despite my best effort to keep it steady. There's nothing left to fix here, Laura. You've burned it all to the ground. At that moment, her parents walked back into the room. Her mother's face was tear-streaked, her father's expression a mixture of anger and disappointment. Laura, her father said quietly, his voice shaking, we raised you better than this. What have you done? Laura turned to them, her sobs growing louder. I know I messed up. I know I let everyone down. But I can't lose him. I can't lose this family. Her mother shook her head, her voice filled with sadness. You already have, Laura. I stood there, watching the woman I had once loved crumble before me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a hollow emptiness where my love for her used to be. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, stiff and exhausted. The events of the previous night felt surreal, like a bad dream that didn't go away when the sun came up. But the pain in my chest was all too real, and I knew what I had to do. Laura was sitting at the dining table when I walked into the room. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold. She didn't say anything as I sat down across from her. I've made my decision, I said, my voice steady. Her eyes met mine, filled with desperation and hope. But I wasn't about to give her the answer she wanted. I can't do this anymore, Laura. I can't live in a marriage where trust is gone. You destroyed that when you brought him into our lives, into our home. There's no coming back from this. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Mark, please, she whispered. I'll do anything. I'll cut him out of my life. I'll go to therapy. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just don't throw us away. I shook my head, my jaw tightening. You already threw us away, Laura. I gave you my trust, my love, and you took it for granted. I deserve better than this. We deserve better than this. Her sobs grew louder, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about punishing her. This was about protecting myself from further pain. I'm filing for divorce, I continued. I've already spoken to a lawyer. We'll split everything fairly and we'll figure out how to handle the logistics. But this marriage is over. She reached for me, but I pulled back, standing up from the table. Don't, I said firmly. You made your choices, Laura. Now you have to live with them. Her parents, who had stayed overnight in the guest room, appeared in the doorway. Her mother's face was a mix of pity and sadness, her father's expression grim. Mark, her father said softly, we're so sorry for what she's done. If there's anything we can do to help, please, let us know. I nodded, grateful for their support, but too drained to say much. Thank you, I said simply. Without another word, I left the room and began packing a bag. I couldn't stay in the house anymore, not with the memories, the betrayal. I planned to stay with a friend for a few days while I figured out my next steps. As I walked out the door, I didn't look back. The life I thought I had with Laura was gone, but I wasn't going to let her lies define my future. It was time to start over, to rebuild my life on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think about that story. Have a good day, and bye.